So you are here, and I think it's about that time for another Iceberg, and I found a couple that I'm going to be working on during the next couple days, so sit tight and bear with us. I'm not huge on Animal Crossing, but when I got the GameCube version, I sure put many hours in it, even using the time skip so I could play for longer without actually having to wait for the real-time clock to go by. I played most of the Animal Crossings for at least a few hours each, and I do like it, but managing a whole island in the newest one, I realize I don't have enough time on my hands. But enough about me and Animal Crossing. Let's talk about the Iceberg. A lot of these I really don't know about, though anything from the first game I have a vague remembrance on, so this was an interesting learning experience. I will preface this by saying further down the post that Reddit user Hat Coffee explained them, so I'll be using what they said and doing some extra research on my own. Now let's dive into the Iceberg, made by Reddit user Bazooka Breezy. Apparently, the mystery of this is that when you make a snowman in Animal Crossing, it comes alive. In New Horizon, it gives the character DIY recipes, but it's still a little weird that you can make actual life out of snow, and you're just a villager without any special powers, assumedly. This is definitely through a bad rap that Nook gets, because obviously in this cutesy game you aren't going to become suddenly homeless. Hat Coffee said it might be due to the fact that in the original game, you couldn't deny a house upgrade after you paid off your loan, sending you in a never-ending spiral of paying off debt. But you have to realize, unlike real life, you don't have to pay monthly, you just pay whenever you can. Even if you get the money, the game doesn't force you to pay it immediately. I know Resetti is in the other games, but I don't know if he gets as meta. And if you don't know who Resetti is, I'll explain. Basically, on all the systems, you can turn off the game without saving. On the GameCube, you can just straight turn off the system or press the reset button. When you load your save back up, you'll be greeted by a mole named Mr. Resetti, who will then begin to scream at your character, telling them to save before turning the system off. If you keep on doing it, you'll get different dialogue until eventually, Resetti will face the screen and plead with the player to stop doing it and to just save the game, though he will threaten to delete your save files, so yeah. From Hat Coffee, it's apparently more of an Easter egg in the first game. If you travel to someone else's village and turn off the game without saving, reloading a save will change the player's face into a gyroids, supposedly to remind people to save before quitting. Well, apparently this goes a little deeper than just this. The Reset Surveillance Center appears in all the games besides Wild World and New Horizons. In City Folk, it can be accessed on a random day throughout the week after 8 PM by passing the cones in the city to the right. Resetti or his brother Don will be in the facility, and if you stay in there long enough, they'll give the player a silver shovel. Sometimes you'll actually see them attending to another player resetting without saving. From Hat Coffee, when you start out in New Leaf, you are immediately mistaken for the new mayor on arrival to your town. The next day, though, you get a letter from the actual person who was supposed to become mayor, saying that they couldn't commit. It is never found out who sent the letter, but since this game isn't super focused on an overarching story, it doesn't matter that much. There is a little backstory between these characters throughout the games, but it's mostly just that Nook and Red used to be friends, but aren't anymore due to some kind of fight. Apparently many fans think that they used to be dating at one point and got into a big fight and broke up very bitterly. This is because all the other animals are wearing clothes, so the fact that KK isn't wearing any means he is straight up naked while jamming out on his guitar. In an Animal Crossing New Horizons Direct, Isabelle had a drink next to her that many Americans thought was whiskey, while most Japanese watchers believed she was drinking barley tea. Later, though, a lesson that Isabelle taught on the differences in different cultures, saying whiskey in Scotland and whiskey in Ireland, so maybe she was drinking some alcohol. From the fandom Wikipedia article, in Wild World, Tom Nook explains to the player that Timmy and Tommy are not related to him by blood. and thinks of them as his pupils and himself as the mentor, stating that he wants to teach others good economic principles in order to help them from suffering the same pitfalls he did when growing up. Certain villagers will tell of a rumor that Tom Nook found them on the streets and raised them by himself. In An Iwata Asks for New Leaf, Mr. Resetti came up, and the team said they almost didn't put him in the game. Through research, they found that younger female players were scared upon meeting him, and that some even cried. The inclusion of the Reset Surveillance Center gave you the option to never have Mr. Resetti show up. According to Hat Coffee, along with this evidence, it was a problem in the original game as well, and might have led to the eventual removal altogether in New Horizons. I would assume from the fact that he eventually just screams that he's gonna delete your save file that these kids were crying, so yeah. This is just saying that some of the animals that become part of your town or island are not regular animals, but some are mythological beasts like Phoebe the Phoenix, Drago the Dragon, Julian the Unicorn. Even Tom Nook and the boys are Tanuki, and Red is a Kitsune. This one is pretty simple and there's not really a lot to it, but in New Horizons on Saturdays at 3:33 a.m. for 1 minute, a alien will appear on the TV. This also happens in New Leaf, but that actually takes place on Sundays and Mondays at 3:33. In Wild World and City Folk, there's a random event in which a spaceship flies over the player's town, but it's actually piloted by Gulliver. So there's a couple alien things happening in Animal Crossing, but it really doesn't go further than that. I don't know a whole lot about this, which may be a shocker, but I am slightly skeptical because most of the workers in this game are women, which maybe that's what this is overall talking about. I know Isabelle is a super hard worker in the game, Mabel and Sable being a couple more hardworking females, and finally Pelly and kind of Phyllis. That's mostly my knowledge on the females in the series, besides Johanne, who is another hard worker. I'm gonna put a link to this if you want to read it. It's kinda edgy, but it's from the point of view of the actual character the guy played as, who was just supposed to be going to his summer camp with pictures and stuff. Essentially, it's a creepypasta. This is from Hat Coffee as well, but there isn't really a lot of child labor in the story, besides the fact that the main character is 8 and has to work to live, which is kind of the definition, but there really isn't any other kids mentioned. Essentially, you have to read the story. Technically, you can call this true, but at least in my case, video games help manage my depression, but I usually just use them to forget about my problems for a bit, because eventually you do have to come back to real life. I don't know if maybe Animal Crossing is more helpful, as fatigue and difficulty concentrating are symptoms, which I already have ADHD, so I get it doubly, so giving a generally doable task and giving you a kind of repetition to get into focus on certain things like paying off a debt you don't truly have to worry about unless you want a bigger house, and small stuff like that. Along with all the villagers that come along who are mostly happy to see you around all the time, this game puts most people in a good mood. This is a song made famous by the infamous Ica Nightmare Town. In New Leaf, you could check out someone's town, and some people were actually able to make scary walkthrough things and stories to go with it. And this song was used heavily, as well as another song that is mentioned on this list. Its Japanese name actually translates to Dream of Sleep. Supposedly, it's to be a more whimsical and dreamlike song. From Hat Coffee again, there were Chinese protesters using New Horizons to spread protest messages, making the Chinese versions have no online functionality as of now. Gyroids represent Haniwa, which are figures made out of terracotta. They were originally set on top of funeral mounds, but later as they developed, they began to be placed outside of the grave area, bordering the grave sites as boundary markers. Some had weapons said to drive evil spirits away and protect the buried, which was usually a ruler of some kind. They were also thought to be containers for souls. Now, the sad part of this is due to the fact that some of them make eerie noises, One sounds like screaming and another sounds like drowning. This doesn't have much to it, but some say that accepting a free item from a villager or otherwise will result in bad luck, though I don't remember anything bad happening when accepting items in the first one, or rather, I didn't put the two events together. This is just straight up the actual thing that happens in the story that I mentioned earlier in Animal Crossing is a child labor cult. This is a top tier oof on the oofometer. After befriending the sisters and talking to Sable a certain number of times, she reveals that their parents died in a car crash, with Mabel being way too young to even remember them. I got this from the Animal Crossing fandom wiki, so I'm not sure if you're actually told how the parents die. Another sad thing coming from this is that it split the family apart, and there are actually 3 sisters, a girl named Label, who left right after their parents died to go to the city, leaving Sable all alone to raise Mabel. Apparently, through jokes he tells, it's hinted that his wife treats him badly, but these could just be jokes, possibly meaning his wife doesn't exist at all, and he just used having a wife as part of the joke, considering that he supposedly lives alone, and she's never been seen throughout the series. Well, taken literally, and from the fandom wiki, Purgatory is regarded as a place of punishment to most people, but others believe that it's more of a waiting room that people go before entering heaven, which is what this theory runs on. There's a lot to do immediately, but it stays calm and relaxing, never questioning whether anthropomorphic animals or being unable to truly leave your town, going to others just being slightly different versions of your own. Then every different game is Purgatory itself, realizing the kid is getting bored, creating a new iteration to preoccupy them while they're still waiting. The Purgatory is trying to hide the trauma of a young child having died from the child, and it creates a happy place devoid of fear and just lets them be kids while they wait. So, Coco's whole appearance is based on a gyroid, which I explained before, meaning that she's possibly possessed by a spirit, so it might be wrong that she's dead, but are spirits alive? She's also a rabbit for some reason. Stitch's appearance is that of a stuffed animal bear, and is defined as technically not an animal, so he's actually just straight up a stuffed animal with different patches of fabric making up his body. Though, if I learned anything from Toy Story, this means he is alive, so theory debunked. Yeah, just look back at what I said in gyroid sounds. I usually write the scripts for these as I go down the iceberg. Sorry. So, CURLOS is a sheep, and randomly he'll be talking about his workout routine before saying, "No one can hear me scream from my basement." This is a pretty random, unless his gym is in his basement or something, but in Animal Crossing, the personality type of the villager determines what kind of things they say, and some characters will have overlap. So from what Hat Coffee says, there are other characters who say this line as well. So this whole thing is actually kind of wild due to the fact that this insinuates Zipper is actually in a costume with an actual zipper on the back that he states is just for fashion. If you approach him from behind and attempt to talk to him, he will say a variety of things that all boil down to calling you rude or something for sneaking up behind him. And he is the only character that has alternate dialogue for initiating a talk from behind. There's also the fact that when you walk out of sight from him, he does a small sigh, which correlates to another line he mumbles about hating his job, so this is like him sighing that he doesn't need to act all chipper anymore because you aren't around. From Hat Coffee, it was originally a rumor from early in Animal Crossing that leaving the game for many days would make them depressed or something, but in my experience this hasn't really happened. The most they do is scold you or actually be super happy that you returned. The biggest thing that might have happened is they leave your town, depending on how long you were away, but suicidal is a bit much. So if you've ever met Gulliver, it is all kinds of suspicious, right? Like, he just so happens to keep falling off his boat and ending up at your town. In New Horizons, his phone is also smashed to pieces, and he needs your help to find them so he can call his crew to pick him back up. This suggests that his crew is repeatedly trying to kill their captain for an unknown reason, and he keeps luckily surviving somehow. This is the same as the other two of Animal Crossing being a child labor cult and you are a kidnapped child. Basically, at a certain part in the story, the main character tries to mail their mother asking for food, and he gets a letter back that he realizes isn't his mother's handwriting, and she only gives him an acorn. Don't want to spoil more of the shenanigans too much, but this letter was forged by Tom Nook. Honestly, this song isn't that bad, but if I booted up my game at night when I was a kid and this was playing, I'd probably just not go to sleep. The creepiest thing about the song is what a dirge is. It's a lament for the dead, especially one forming part of a funeral rite, so it's a song played at a funeral when burying someone. Why they put a dirge in a kid's game, I could only guess, as some cultures are more accepting and understanding, of the concept of death. Alright, that's it. A couple of these theories kind of connected together, but all in all, it was fun to research all the weird findings about this game. And the creepypasta thing is actually kind of an interesting read, and I actually learned a lot about the characters that I thought I already knew. More icebergs to come. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next video.